The ghost in the conference room. The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. I'm sorry, but that sounds like separation, not unity. For a moment, silence claimed the room. It was not the quiet of thought or the pause of consideration. It was the brittle stillness of a dropped glass, hovering before the shatter. 26 pairs of eyes turned toward the corner of the conference room, where Emily Dawson stood frozen, her cleaning cloth still in her trembling hand. Something was wrong in the gleaming cathedral of Phoenix Tech's 38th floor. Not with the mahogany table polished to mirror sheen, capable of seating 20 executives without a hint of intimacy. Not with the floor-to-ceiling windows framing San Francisco Bay in crystalline perfection. The blue-gray water sparkling like a corporate screensaver. The wrongness lived in the spaces between people, the way conversations stopped when Emily entered. In the practiced choreography of eye contact, carefully avoided. The wrongness was the silence that wrapped itself around her like a second skin. The silence of being unseen, unheard, unnecessary. Emily had spent 3 years perfecting this invisibility. She moved through rooms like vapor, her cleaning cart whispering across marble floors, shoulders curved inward, eyes downcast, movements efficient, silent, almost spectral. She was the ghost in gray uniform, present but absent, shaping the world without ever being acknowledged by it. And like all ghosts, she saw everything. She had watched Alexander Reed, Phoenix Tech's rising star, practice this presentation 17 times. 17 times she had heard him stumble over the same Mandarin phrase. 17 times she had bitten her tongue until it bled, her hands tightening on her cleaning cloth as dangerous meanings twisted themselves into hopeful words. Each repetition was agony, a slow-motion disaster. Alexander's voice carried the smooth authority of a man used to commanding rooms. But to Emily's trained ear, his tones were catastrophically wrong. Separation instead of unity. Division disguised as harmony. Disaster dressed as respect. The executives around the table carried the nervous tension of gamblers betting everything on a single throw of dice. Lauren Hill, Vice President of Strategy, gripped her leather portfolio until her knuckles whitened. Alexander's jaw tightened each time he stumbled. Collective breath held in suspension, as though millions of dollars in international alliances balanced on the fragile thread of one mispronounced phrase. Emily bent over the whiteboard, wiping a spotless corner for the 3rd time. She tried to focus on the familiar rhythm of cloth against glass, but her grandmother's voice rose unbidden in her memory. Sometimes staying silent is not kindness, little flower. Sometimes it is cruelty. She opened her mouth. Then she felt Lauren Hill's eyes on her, razor sharp, cutting like glass across the room. Lauren's expression was a fortress. You don't speak here. You don't matter here. Emily's mouth closed again. The silence pressed heavier. But then, a shift. Frankie Coleman, the night security guard, appeared in the doorway for his routine check. Weathered face, tired eyes, a man invisible in his own way. His gaze found Emily, then followed hers to Alexander. For a heartbeat, recognition passed between them, the unspoken bond of two people who worked in the margins, who saw disasters before anyone else did. Frankie gave the smallest of nods, almost imperceptible. But to Emily, it felt like permission. Her voice slipped out, softer than a whisper, yet carrying across the silence. I'm sorry, but that sounds like separation, not unity. And the world shifted. Act 2, breaking the silence. The silence after her words was sharper than any sound, forked lightning without thunder. Alexander's eyebrows drew together, the assured rhythm of his speech derailed. Lauren's head snapped toward Emily with the precision of a predator marking prey. Around the table, suits shifted in their chairs, a ripple of discomfort running through them. Emily stood still, every nerve alive, every instinct screaming at her to shrink back into invisibility. But something inside her had already changed. The dam of silence had cracked. The water was rushing through. 20 minutes later, she found herself in a smaller conference room, its sterile air thick with coffee and corporate anxiety. Across from her sat Dr. Margaret Chen, Phoenix Tech's senior Mandarin translator. Dr. Chen's eyes were kind, the corners creased with the patience of someone who had spent decades guiding people through the labyrinth of language. "Please, Emily," Dr. Chen said gently. "Repeat the phrase." Emily swallowed, her throat dry. She let the words flow the way her grandmother had taught her. Years ago, sitting by the window of a cramped apartment where the smell of jasmine tea lingered in the curtains, her Mandarin carried the cadence of Beijing streets, soft but precise, each tone falling into place like water over stones. When she finished, the silence that followed was of a different kind, not brittle, but reverent. "Remarkable," Dr. Chen murmured. She turned to Alexander, whose face was a study in strained composure. "She's absolutely correct. Your pronunciation altered the meaning. Instead of unity, you've been saying separation." And her accent, Dr. Chen's smile softened. Her accent suggests she's familiar with Beijing dialect, which, given tomorrow's meeting, is precisely what we need. Lauryn Hill's manicured fingers drummed against the table, sharp and rhythmic, like rain against glass. "This is absurd," Lauryn snapped. "She's a janitor. Since when do we consult cleaning staff on international negotiations?" The words stung, though Emily had expected nothing less. Years of invisibility did not vanish in a moment. But for the first time, Emily did not shrink from the sting. Dr. Chen's eyes stayed on her, unwavering. "Titles don't change truth, Ms. Hill. Right is right, no matter the uniform." Alexander exhaled slowly, his jaw working as if grinding stone. Tomorrow's meeting could make or break this company's Asia expansion. If the phrase is wrong, he stopped, glanced at Emily, then looked back at Dr. Chen. "We can't afford a mistake." Lauren's lips pressed into a hard line, but she said nothing. Emily sat very still, hands folded in her lap. Her heart hammered like a drum, but for the first time in years, she felt visible. Act 3. The meeting. Morning came with the shimmer of sunlight over San Francisco Bay, the city caught between fog and fire. The Phoenix Tech team gathered in the grand conference hall, nerves dressed in designer suits. Across the table sat the visiting delegation from Beijing, their expressions polite but unreadable, faces carved from centuries of diplomacy. Alexander began the presentation. His voice was steady, his English polished, his slides impeccable. But when he reached the crucial phrase, he hesitated. His gaze flicked sideways just for a heartbeat to where Emily stood at the edge of the room. She gave the smallest nod. Permission returned. Alexander repeated the phrase, carefully shaping the tones exactly as Emily had demonstrated. The words landed soft but clear. Dr. Chen's approving smile flickered. The delegation leader's expression shifted barely, but enough. A tightness eased, a nod almost imperceptible. The atmosphere softened like a rope suddenly loosened. From there, the meeting flowed with cautious optimism. Negotiations unfolded, questions asked and answered, offers laid on the table. But the moment that mattered most had already passed. The door to trust had opened on a single phrase spoken correctly, and it had opened because of Emily. Act 4, Transformation. When the meeting ended, polite applause followed, the kind reserved for business victories. Executives clapped Alexander on the back, relief visible in every smile. Lauren's praise was cool but present, her eyes darting toward Emily with the faintest flicker of something she rarely allowed herself to feel acknowledgement. But the true moment came later. As the delegation left, one of the Beijing representatives paused near Emily. A woman in her 50s, eyes sharp but kind. She spoke in Mandarin, her voice low enough for only Emily to hear. "You saved them today," she said simply. "Never forget the power of your voice." Emily's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. Hours later, long after the executives had toasted their victory and the conference room had emptied, Emily stood alone by the vast windows overlooking the bay. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass uniform gray. Hair pulled tight, but something was different. She was no longer invisible. For 3 years, she had perfected the art of silence, of blending into walls and marble floors. But all it had taken was one phrase, one moment of courage, to break the spell. The ghost was gone. In her place stood Emily Dawson, woman, worker, witness. Not a shadow, not a silence, but a voice. And that voice would change everything. Epilogue. The language of belonging. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread through Phoenix Tech. The story of the janitor who corrected the rising star. The translator who confirmed it. The deal that almost collapsed on a single mispronounced word. Some dismissed it as rumor, some resented it, but others remembered. And Emily, though still in uniform, walked differently. Shoulders straighter, eyes lifted, invisible no longer. Her grandmother's words echoed again, softer now, less like warning and more like truth. Sometimes staying silent is not kindness, little flower. Sometimes it is cruelty. Emily had spoken. And in speaking, she had found not only her courage,